Hello, everybody, and welcome to Bible Verse Breakdown. Let's get straight into the verse we're going to be learning about today, which is Exodus chapter 20, verse 3, which reads, "Thou shalt have no other gods before me." Now, in this case, a god is something that we elevate to the point that it begins to control us. We begin to look up to that thing, and it has a way of affecting the way we think, the way we make decisions, how we generally live our lives. If you look at the time of the Israelites, that is when God Almighty first gave this command, he was talking mostly about physical gods because those around them had a way of elevating physical things such as stones, things that they made with their own hands, to that worship level. They would bow down to it and do all kinds of stuff that God Almighty would have wanted for himself because he created humanity so that we could worship him and not other things that we create for ourselves. He said in Isaiah chapter 43 verse 21, "This people have I formed for myself, and they shall shew forth my praise." So essentially, he wants to be in control of our lives. He does not want us to replace him with something that we suddenly find in the world, like money or anything else like that. And then we elevate that so that it begins to control our lives. And then God just becomes something small in our day-to-day lives. And Isaiah the prophet had explained in Isaiah chapter 42 verse 17, that those who elevate physical things to be above God Almighty in terms of what controls our lives, there will be shame in the end, because in times of trouble, such things will be of no help. That was where he said, "They shall be turned back, they shall be greatly ashamed, that trust in graven images, that say to the molten images, Ye are our gods." And like I said, back then, people did this with physical things like stone and other stuff like that. But it also goes to other stuff like money. Many people, they love money so much that it begins to affect the way they judge matters, the kind of friends they make. For example, people who love money might want to target those rich people so that they can be friends with them and get a lot of money as a result, and other things in that direction. If you look at what Gehazi had done in 2 Kings chapter 5, you can see that he elevated money to the point that it was like a god. Because after Elisha had dismissed the gifts that Naaman had brought, which were of very much value indeed, Gehazi snuck out to go and bring a few of them for himself so that he could be enriched a little bit. He just loved gifts and money, and Elisha judged him as a result by saying that that leprosy that Naaman had, you and every person who comes out of your seed is also going to have that leprosy. So that is what happens to people who elevate something above God Almighty in their lives. And in our time, the last days, we can see that people are still doing this. Stuff like data and research and science and technology and the healthcare system and politics are becoming so important in people's lives. For example, if data is proving something or saying that humans should be going in a certain direction, then everybody will begin to just follow along with that and be like, yes, because scientists have researched this, we must go in that direction, and other stuff like that. But that is elevating what they are saying above what God Almighty has said about how we should worship him and habits that he wants us to do, like love others and be patient and so on. Those things are being pushed aside because what the government and other sources are saying has become so important to our lives. We have to keep God in the center. God should be that most important thing so that we don't end up trusting in man. What God Almighty has said about the future, we have to take that as gold so that we don't put our trust in those around us. If we read Psalm chapter 146 and verses 3 and 4, we can understand this. "Put not your trust in princes, nor in the Son of Man, in whom there is no help. His breath goeth forth, he returneth to his earth, and that very day his thoughts perish." We should rather trust in God Almighty, make him the centerpiece of our lives, because that God Almighty is like reliable. David said in Psalm chapter 18 verse 2 that God was his rock and his fortress and his deliverer and his buckler and other stuff that prove that God Almighty is secure, trustworthy, and reliable. And to conclude, we can look at what Moses had said in Deuteronomy chapter 6 verse 5, because that commandment, which is the greatest commandment, according to Matthew chapter 22 and verses 37 and 38, is essentially what I've just talked about, and how God Almighty should be that biggest thing in our lives. And thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy might. And by the way, one of our previous verse breakdowns broke this down in a similar way that I have just done. So it's important that God Almighty is that most important thing in our lives. And that is where I'm going to stop on discussing that verse, Exodus chapter 20, verse 3, which once again reads, Thou shalt have no other gods before me. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you won't miss when we make our next verse breakdown. Have a great day, and God bless you.